We are live.
Welcome to the Atheist Republic Sunday Hangout. I'm Makisha. We have Armin and Nirav currently, and we'll have people joining us shortly.
Yes.
Today we are going to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the themes related to the shootings in Paris, specifically themes like free speech and some of the Muslim individuals and communities that are coming out in favor of free speech, even against their own religion. So we're going to talk about some of those things that some people might not know about, and whatever thoughts people might have as they join in. And we've moved we're going to have a continuation of Hinduism, which we will probably have next week, but we will let you know that when that is finalized. So we don't have any guests, so we can just get started by maybe talking, just kind of letting you guys get started talking about what it is that maybe it's just some thoughts you have or some questions you wanted to toss out.
Sorry, just before we start, the people that were on the here yes, there. Who else was there? Sorry, I made them.
I think that's all.
That's all. Okay, good. Yeah, I just want to, before we go talking about this, I want to point out the direction that I thought we should take with this, because it seems like within the atheist community and the Muslim community that I see online, there seems to be a lot of the conversation seems to be mostly around whether these attacks represent Islam or don't represent Islam, and on the other hand, seems to be this clash between Muslims and non-Muslims about what's the right thing to do here and how what's the best way to look at this. And I feel like that's not what we should be focusing on. I think when anything like this happens, we should, instead of looking at this from the perspective of Muslim versus non-Muslim, we should look at it from the perspective of people that stand for free right, the freedom of expression, versus people that think that somehow we should, for the sake of not offending people, limit that in certain situations. And I feel like, a lot of people keep saying that these attacks don't represent the majority of Muslims, and I think most of us already know that, and I think talking about that here seems to be missing the point. The problem that we have with a lot of Muslim moderates in these situations is not that they support the attacks. We know that Muslim moderates don't support these attacks. The frustration that I have with many Muslim moderates, and not all Muslim moderates, is that they think that it's enough for them to come out and say that they don't support these attacks. And what I want to see, and I have seen that, I'm not saying that there's moderates don't do that at all, but I think the majority of them don't do that. What I would like to see more of is more Muslim moderates coming out and not just standing against the violence, but also supporting the cartoonists and the people that are that want to be able to criticize Islam freely. But what I see is actually the opposite. I feel like a lot of Muslim moderates come out and they blame the terrorists, and they also blame the cartoonists, and they blame the victims. And that's what I think, as the atheist movement community, the way for them to be able to position themselves to best handle these situations is, instead of making it about atheists, non-Muslims versus Muslims, to find a way to unite with those minority Muslims, there are out there that are actually coming out and saying like, I accept everyone's right to make fun of my religion. And when we find these people, I think we should put the spotlight on them, because I think they don't, when they do that, the reason why there's so few of them is because they actually get a bigger backlash than us when they say that, because they're from the Muslim community, and when they say that, they get, so a lot of them don't, even though, a lot of Muslims, even though they want to support freedom of speech in this kind of situation, it's really hard, because they're saying, I support your right to draw Muhammad. Like, that's a really hard thing for a Muslim to say. But when they do that, I feel like we need to find these people and we need to support them as much as we can to encourage such behavior. Anyways, I'm going to stop that because I think I talked too much.
I think that's. I think a lot of what I tend to, the position I tend to take in these sort of situations. First of all, we at Atheist Republic grieve with the rest of the world the just senseless loss of life. I don't think loss of life has sense to it, but it's the situation, and it's not just the people, it's not just the journalists, the cartoonists who were killed. There was a Muslim police officer who was killed. That it's loss of life across the board, and we are saddened along with the rest of the world. So we want to make sure we're clear in saying that. The thing that I tend to come back to is very similar, Armin, to what you have said, is that we tend to get bogged down in these conversations in things that I just don't think are very productive. The themes of our conversations tend to be overly simplified, overly generalized, and really miss an opportunity to have the conversations that I think are helpful. I think my guess is what is difficult about engaging in those conversations is that, because this happens with everybody actually, anytime somebody from within a tribe tries to bring up points of criticism about their particular group, they get probably more backlash from within the group than they're going to get from anybody else. And that happens in atheism too, all the time. So it's an interesting point to try to call those people out. And I think, Armin, you made the perfect point, which is that they need support from everybody to bring up those important issues and to bring the criticisms out that need to be handled. But I don't see that happening. So how, like, I guess what I'm asking is how maybe a good conversation to have at some point is how can we, as Atheist Republic, proactively support that? Because what I see happening is if we were to do that, we would be criticized for coming out and supporting Muslims. Because I see that as a very delicate situation. You know what I mean?
Well, I don't think we don't. I mean, we have enough people hating us that adding to that is not going to make that much of a difference. So that's okay if we want to be criticized.
Well, no, I know we don't have any problem being criticized.
Sorry, go ahead. You were talking.
No, go ahead. I actually should speak a little bit less.
I think we can serve ourselves better by talking about what I think is the absolute core. It's free speech, and the fact that blasphemy should now officially be, as a consensus, be ended altogether. The concept of blasphemy has to be defeated in every society. And of course, before we go on, is because what I'm observing is it's not just the effects of what has happened in Paris does not just affect the issue with Islam. I'll give you some observations from Hinduism. Just before this, last month, there was a film that was released in India called PK, and it was it was a satirical and also critical look at scams and God men and people who are conning the public in the name of religions. And while I think the filmmakers did their best to cover the hypocrisies of all faiths, the Hindu nationalists were attacking the film, saying that this was unfairly uh, emphasizing on Hinduism, problems in Hinduism, and it was kind of making fun of the gods. And at that time, the debate in India, the people, secular-minded people, came out and said, no, this is a free speech issue. They are allowed to make whatever movie they want to make, emphasize whatever they want to do. Now, with the Paris attack, a handful of people, it was first a handful of people, really respected people in India who started saying, why did you provoke the Muslims? Why did you go here? And these were the same people who just a little while ago were telling, according to the Hindu nationalists, were saying, hey, you can criticize Hinduism as much as you like. So, believe it or not, there are other religions that are watching. Now, what happens from here is that the Hindu nationalists will try to drag up the tempo. They will say, well, we're going to start using the same thing that a lot of Muslims are saying, is that, well, oh yeah, we respect free speech, but why do you push these buttons? Why did you go this far? Why did you talk about the prophet? Why did you do this? Don't do that. Kind of.
Yeah,
They'll threaten you. The Hindus will start using this technique. If this is what will happen if the liberals and seculars don't get it right, the Hindus will start using this technique, and the Christians whose fortunes have been collapsing in Europe and North America will start saying the same kind of thing. And
I,
and so this is really, it involves all religions, and it's a stake of, this is a time where, okay, now we got to get rid of the blasphemy law, not only in places like India and Pakistan, which is extremely difficult, but Ireland has a blasphemy law. England has blasphemy law. Some American states still have some provisions like that. You have to make this is a moment of making the clean sweep, and that's what I think is at stake here.
I do think, though, that this is actually shifting the viewpoint everywhere in the world, because I used to always see that there is a bias to when it comes to free speech. Everybody was for free speech until it came to Islam. When you look at the movie about North Korea, when it was the interview, when it comes to making fun of Christianity, when it comes to making criticizing any idea and anybody trying to limit that, there was always a global, there was a majority support for always letting people say whatever they want to say, until people started targeting Islam, and all of a sudden everybody was like, their standards would change. They were like, why are you targeting? Why are you being bigoted? But now with this cartoon, it seems like that has changed, and people's intolerance for limiting freedom of speech is applying here as well. Like, if you look at the marches in Paris today and yesterday, and if you look at what the global leaders, if you look at the global leaders, when these things used to happen, they always be like, oh, we condemn terrorism, and we also condemn making fun of the respected prophet of Muslims, as if these two are somehow equal, like the crimes that the terrorists did and whatever the cartoonists did. But with this one, it seems like the focus is on the freedom of speech, and the focus is on not letting anything come in between people and their views and expressing their views. And if you look at sorry, I'm gonna mute Utsa because if you can use a headphone so there's no echo, that would be great. So let me too again. So I'm gonna wait. All right. So what was I saying? Lost my. Yeah, I'm gonna have to.
I think that's. Sorry, go ahead.
So the way forward, I think, and since we're talking about Islam, I think one of the major problems with Islam is that apparently, I mean, obviously, that Islam is in need of some reform. some provisions by which the offending parts of the Quran can be sort of, muted.
Your microphone cut out.
So we're having some sound issues with whoever I don't know if this is, I don't know if we were having this problem with Rav last time too. I don't know if not being able to hear people is a Google Hangouts issue, or I don't know what the deal is, but I think the freedom of speech conversation, actually somebody posted a link in our team group, and it was a commentary by Stephen Fry, and I'm going to try to find the link and put it in the comments. But if somebody else can beat me to it, that's great too. Because I felt like it was a good both and way of approaching the issue. I think some people might not like the approach of satire, or the way that certain groups criticize religions or whatever, and it's difficult for us to have the both and conversation, to realize that it doesn't have to be a zero-sum equation. It doesn't have to be I either support freedom of speech or I support the freedom of people to peacefully practice their religion. And I feel like that's always what the conversation becomes diluted down to, is I can't somehow, for some reason, I can't support both. And I think it's worth noting that I support both. I believe we support both. We don't believe, as Atheist Republic community, that it has to be either or. Even those people who are very strongly anti-theist and are very strong advocates for the elimination of all religion, you can still completely come out as strongly in favor of supporting somebody's right to peacefully practice their religion in whatever way that looks like to them, as it exists now. So, I mean, I don't really even have like questions or comments per se, but I think that the freedom of speech issue is the most important in this context, but it is also somewhat complex. Do you guys, what do you feel are some of the complexities that come into the freedom of speech issue? Because I don't believe it's just everybody can say whatever they want. Like, I don't think that is what freedom of speech is. If it were that, it would be, I feel like it would be really easy. So where are the complexities you're seeing? What are you hearing from people? What are the conversations you're hearing?
Go ahead, Ahmed.
I mean, it is what everybody wants. Everybody should be able to say whatever they want to say. I think even if there should be no limits to that. I mean, as soon as we introduce a limit, some people then are going to be like, well, why do you put a limit on that? And I want to put a if you find that offensive, if you find that harmful, I find this harmful.
I know, but I don't. I have kids, and immediately my mind goes to the things that people are capable of saying about a single individual child. But even if you put limits on it in the sense that you can't attack a person, which is sometimes what people want to do, like you can't threaten their life or whatever, well, that's a limit. That's a limit on free speech. What about people who are oppressed groups, or people who have no power, like children? How can you say that somebody can just, like an entire group of people, can start speaking out against a group of kids that ends up inflicting harm? Because there is psychological, emotional, mental damage that we can do to people in a way that is just as oppressive as coming to their home and beating them up.
Well, if you're actually inflicting actual harm, then that's already limited, not from a freedom of speech point of view, but from a causing harm point of view. Obviously, if I'm planning a terrorist attack on an airport or something and I'm telling people how to do it, I mean, I think that's...
No, I'm not talking about physical harm. I'm saying
Oh.
that a group of people can inflict psychological harm on another group of people. We have already established that to be true. So how do we just say, well, anybody can say whatever they want? The reason why I bring up kids is because they are relatively powerless against adults. So if a group of adults wanted to, start attacking verbally online, for example, a group of kids for something they did or something they put out there, are we saying that that's, carte blanche? If we, freedom of speech across the board, people can say whatever they want.
Well, freedom of speech includes us attacking people for what they're saying, like ridiculing, shaming, people for what they're saying using their freedom of speech. So
right, but that doesn't mitigate the harm, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the people coming against the people being harmful have as much power or are in as great of numbers as the people inflicting the harm. Sometimes it is uneven, and another power has to step in and say that's not acceptable. We do this all the time. Countries do this,
Well, I think also freedom of speech, when we allow that, I think we should also be able to provide tools and opportunities for people to only be exposed to what they want to be exposed. So freedom of speech does include me being able to say what I want to say, but it does not include me being able to force people to be exposed to what I want to say. So I should be able to, whoever doesn't want to hear what I want to say, whoever does get offended about what I say, whoever should be able to not get exposed to that. And if there's any way that I'm actually forcing people or going to places to where I'm not welcome to say what I want to say, then that should not be allowed. If I'm advocating humanism in my environment, that should be tolerated. If I go inside a church and then start yelling why Christianity is wrong and or go inside a mosque and saying why Islam is wrong, and people are get out of here, oh, why are you this is freedom of speech. No, that's not freedom of speech. That's that should not be allowed. So in the same way, if I go to if I target somebody targets your child wants to abuse them mentally, they are basically in an environment where they're not welcomed in, and that should not be allowed. I think freedom of speech does not include the right to be heard. Freedom of speech only includes the right to say what you want to say.
I want to quickly make 2 points based on Makisha's analogy, and forgive me if I'm not using it correctly, but okay, with children. Now, if the implication being that children would not know how to respond or will not be capable of responding, just strictly in that case, one of the sensible things to do would be for concerned adults to help them learn how to respond. And if you're talking about something being said on the net by adults about children, children learn really quickly about the net, and they've done all kinds of online initiatives, so they can be trained on, shown how to respond. They can be helped in articulating their own response. The second point was that, okay, are we implying that because they're children, in this situation, would that mean they always need protection? Would that mean that they would never have been doing things on their own, that they are completely blameless, that the adults don't have a right to say something? We do know that children can be mean. We know that they can be bullies. That sort of thing goes on. They don't fully realize what they're doing, and adults need to be able to speak up. So the right of the adult to say something, and the way the child should respond is, again, it comes within free speech. What children what you don't have is the ability to say to somebody, don't say this, or that you react angrily to somebody and you try to hurt them for saying something.
Right. Yeah.
Also, if I
I
might
see what you're
add,
saying. So let's. I want to give everybody. Some of this is a little bit of devil's advocate conversation. I want to make sure that we stay on at least a somewhat thin thread of connection to what our topic is. But I want to give everybody a chance to also finish their thoughts about this particular situation or question that I brought up.
so am I audible? I don't.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, right. So I think what I think we should do is try to there's a difference between the way people limit your ability to, say what you want to say. I think Islam is a special case in the sense that when there are limitations to people's right to say something in normal society, those can be dealt with. I mean, even if they are unpleasant, they can be dealt with. But Islamic extremism seems to be taking upon itself to kill people, and to literally like subdue them in a sense to kill them, and these kind of terrorism should be sort of separated from normal disagreements that we have within society about freedom of speech. And in that sense, Islam is unique in my opinion, in its in its desire to suppress any form of ridicule or criticism. So I think we should talk about Islam and whether it is amenable to reform at all. I mean, whether there can be any reform in Islam so that people can be brought to include the freedom of speech within Islam.
And Islam itself enjoys, while we are discussing this, Islam itself enjoys maximum amount of free speech. They publish all kinds of literature that attack other religions, tell why other religions are inferior to Islam, attack Jews, attack Hindus, attack polytheists, whatever. They attack everyone. There are a lot of leaders that just openly go about saying, either you convert to Islam or you're going to hell. And all these things are, at that time, we don't point this out. Look, you're enjoying the same privilege. In fact, you're crossing the very boundaries that you're attacking other people of having crossed with you. There's clearly a double standard.
Yeah, which is a really good point, and I think that does tend to be where some of the frustration comes from, at least in my experience in conversations I'm having with people, is they're like, look, somebody can come to me and tell me personally, and not just say, oh, well, all of you, atheists, fill in the blank, but you personally are going to hell, are a horrible person, are a horrible parent, your poor children, I personally can be attacked in that way, and that's considered protected free speech. But if I were to draw a cartoon negatively representing the Prophet Muhammad, all of a sudden that is open for criticism, and now I'm a bad person. So that is a lot of the double standard, I think, seems to be where a lot of the frustration is coming from. Am I kind of accurately representing what you were saying, Seal?
Exactly. Yeah, they're working to the tenets of their religion. A lot of the
But
and
talk about whether it's actually possible for Islam.
We have two people talking at once. Sorry.
Sorry.
Sahil, go ahead.
Okay, so I don't know. We should talk about whether it's possible for there to be a consensus within the Islamic community about reforming their own religion. Is it possible, do you think?
I think there's a challenge to that, because Islam itself teaches that you should fight people that mock the Prophet. But even though that's the case, I think there are examples of high-profile moderate Muslims, even though they are the minority, and even though they are attacked by the Muslim community themselves, there are some Muslim moderates that fight for the rights of non-Muslims to criticize their religion. And I think we as a atheist community should put the spotlight on them and highlight that to show that these people do exist, and encourage more Muslims to join their ranks. And the way that we could show our support for these kind of Muslims is to basically make it clear that even though we criticize Islam, we are able to unite with you against bigotry and against generalization of all Muslims, right? So even though we attack the ideology, we don't attack the people, and if we are able to unite with you against bigotry, and we are hoping that at least some of you could unite with us in the fight against freedom of, in the fight for freedom of speech. And I just want to read you a quote from Majid Nawaz that he said on CNN. He said this. He said, "I am a Muslim. We come from a Muslim community, and we are very critical of Western or American foreign policy. So if I have got the right, and if other Muslims have got the right to criticize, likewise, everyone else has also got the right to criticize everything else." And this is a very high-profile Muslim, and I think quotes like this from people like this needs a little bit more attention, and that's what I think we need to be able to do to be able to.
I have a question. Is Majid Nawaz still regarded as a real Muslim by other Muslims?
No, but not by many Muslims. But
Now
yeah,
that's I think that could be one of the issues, because there's another distinguished Canadian gentleman, Tariq Fateh, regularly attacked. Just because he opens his mouth, they consider him to be a non-Muslim, a takfiri, whatever the term is. This is, I mean, this is again, it kind of goes in so deep, and it's really hard for someone from the outside who is not a Muslim to be able to, to find a solution for this, because if it is so literal in Islam that you cannot criticize, you cannot say anything wrong, bad about it. It's like, if you cross that, you allow people to cross the boundary, you cross the boundary yourself, seemingly, and you're out the pale of Islam altogether. You're not considered to be one of them at all. And that's how finally the battle line has been drawn now.
But isn't that kind of a good thing? Like when we connect with people who share some of our thoughts and views on a specific thing, for example, within Islam, then isn't it good when that becomes even more and more finely drawn out? Like in other words, by doing that, the people who continue to, I can see this in my mind, and I'm trying to put it verbally. It's kind of like if we're here and we're going to, there's really progressive Muslims who are saying the things that Majid Nawaz is saying, for example, and so we're going to kind of reach out and join him, then that pulls away some of the more fundamentalist, sort of extremist people in the view of others. So then there's the gap becomes wider between them, I think. I mean, I guess I'm not sure I'm understanding, are you saying that's a bad thing, or that it just makes it difficult because it doesn't speak to other Muslims? Because I think, I don't know, I think it actually provides, at least within Christianity, that's kind of how it works.
Well, I think what Nirav is saying is that mainstream Islam is so well defined that it's harder than Christianity to just break off from it and just say, this is the new definition of Islam. Islam has done a very good job at defining its core,
yeah.
And it allows much less variety than what Christianity has been able to do. In Christianity, you have many people saying the Bible is the Word of God, and some people saying no, this is just inspired by God, and some Christians even can say that there's flaws within the Bible, and all of these people are Christians. But within Islam, if somebody come and says oh, I don't think if I think Quran has flaws, I think you could argue that person is technically not a Muslim anymore, because it's just that it's hard for these new But I think we could even though it's hard, I think we could encourage that.
But that's because it used to be hard within Christianity too. It wasn't always like this. It's not like Christians were always accepted, progressive Christians were always accepted in that way. It wasn't always like that. There are definitely, have been times and entire swaths of history of Christianity where orthodoxy was very small and specific, and to call yourself a Christian, there was only one particular type of Christian you could be. So I don't think it's a hopeless case.
Well, it's not, but I think the thing is with Christianity, it's easier to do that because it's hard to point into the Bible to point out why you're not a Christian, right? But the Quran does a very good job at making sure it clarifies exactly what's acceptable and what's not. For example, like even the Quran even says that, oh, the people that pick some part of the Quran and ignore some parts of other parts of the Quran, these people are going to end up in hell. It says it right in the Quran. So,
but there's verses like that in the Bible too.
Oh,
you can make an idea, you can make a case for a very rigid orthodoxy within Christianity and a call toward fundamentalism. I just think that the voices against that particular way of being Christian or expressing Christianity have become louder than the others, and it's become more acceptable. I don't think that's necessarily because of the way the Bible is written, or I think there's a history, of course. Like, I'm not saying that they're the same and they can be treated the same and that it's just as easy within Islam, because there's a lot of other factors involved. I'm not trying to oversimplify it. I'm just saying that I don't think it's necessarily a good thing for us to just say, I mean, and you said this, Armin, you're like, just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. And I don't think it's impossible to shift Islam and then hopefully, just as with Christianity, further and further shift it away, because I think in doing it by degrees is often easier for people. Hello.
Amr, do you have something to say? Because I'm really interested in saying what I think you're muted, but if you have something to say, because you're from, I think you're in a Muslim country right now. So if you could share what people are saying. No, we can't hear you. Nope, we can't hear you. Nope. All right. For now, let's move on. Maybe.
I think they have to unmute themselves.
Oh, he gave up. He just walked away.
Well, now would be the time for anybody else to share.
Yeah.
So,
if nobody,
I think there's one aspect of Islam. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Seyo.
Okay. So we haven't discussed this yet, and I'm eager to know what you guys think. How much do you think the rigidity of Islam is the result of the prevalence of dictatorships and monarchies in the Middle East? Because a lot of the fundamental part of Islam is propagated by the Wahhabism of Saudi Arabia, say, or Brunei is a country that's very orthodox and rigid, and most of these countries seem to exploit the rigidity of Islam to keep their populations under control, because many of them are dictatorships or monarchies. So I think a lot of the part of the reason why Islam is so rigid at the moment is because there are these very powerful governments or religious leaders who have a say in how it is perceived.
I think it has less to do with dictators, because dictators actually are in Muslim countries are more secular than. Okay, I'm gonna mute Amarin now for a second. I think it has more to do with the brainwashing that goes on. Like, even though I'm an atheist right now, I'm an ex-Muslim, and when I see a cartoon of Muhammad or any criticism of Muhammad, even though I do that as well, I feel like something really evil is going on. I feel like to this day that indoctrination still has an effect on me. When I see a cartoon of Muhammad, I feel icky. I feel like there's something wrong with this. I feel like somebody needs to even after all these years, and after all these years of being an atheist and being a critic of Islam, I still can't get past that. And I don't think that's the effect of dictators trying to control people. I think that has something to do with how Islam so effectively makes you feel this kind of connection with Muhammad and the holiness of the religion. I don't know how it does that, but it does that
The
very
point is,
effectively.
in a democracy, there would be other schools of thought, and they wouldn't be suppressed. So in Saudi Arabia, we know there's so many atheists and free thinkers, and even moderate Muslims, but they aren't allowed to express themselves. And in that sense, I suppose there is some merit in that point, don't you think?
Well, if you take the case of India right now, Muslims, I mean, you're living in a democracy. How much criticism really of Islam is permissible? The PK example, for instance. Right now you have secularists saying, well, don't go that far. India was the first country to ban the satanic verses. The only reason, I mean, they really put out there, which supposedly everybody understood, was that they're trying to protect law and order. Well, why don't you try telling the Muslim minority they don't have the right to mount violent protests? They never even gave that a shot. India just flat out banned satanic verses. No more criticism of Islam. And this is happening in a secular democracy that's not Muslim. So there's I mean, I think this is not really much of a political problem as much as a problem with this community and the way it regards its own religion.
Yeah, I think India is a great example because you have a country where Muslims are not the majority, and you have a country that is not a dictatorship, and still you see Muslims getting very offended about anything, any criticism of Islam, and being extremely sensitive about it. So I think Islam does an extremely effective job at getting the people itself to stand against the scrutiny of religion, rather than having, rather than having governments or do that for them. Sorry.
Any other thoughts on that particular? I think we've kind of, we're obviously all over the map. There's so many topics and issues being discussed here. I'm not even going to really try to rein anybody in. So whatever thoughts. This is kind of an opportunity, I guess, in the last 15 minutes or so we have for you guys to share any thoughts you have about this terrorist attack and how it relates to how atheism responds and things like that.
Let's get people that haven't said anything yet to say something. Like Deb, maybe could say something.
I'm always particularly interested in hearing what things are like where other people are, especially within the Atheist Republic community, because we are global. Some of us live in North America, but we have a lot of people who don't. And it's so these experiences are felt and expressed and discussed differently where people are. So I'm really interested in just hearing, like, what are the conversations you guys are hearing within your countries?
That's why I wanted to see what Amer has to say, but his audio doesn't seem to work. But Deb, do you want to say something?
Yeah. I wanted to say, earlier I heard Sahil talk, and the thing I wanted to say then was, I heard him say something about Islamic extremism. The point I wanted to make then, and I'll come back to what Meera was just saying right now, but the point I wanted to make then was that I think extremism is just extremism. I mean, there isn't, I mean, that's what the media does. That's how every religion kind of tries to say, blame the other by saying, oh, you're a Hindu extremist and you're a Muslim extremist and you're a Christian extremist or whatever. But I don't think it's got, I mean, and it's very convenient because everything is written down in terms of a text for the Quran. It's very convenient to say, oh, the Quran says so and so, and the Bible says so and so. As Makisha was saying, that the Bible says similar things as well. But for Hinduism, for instance, since there isn't a text that dictates to adherents what is right and what is not, particularly, it's very easy to point fingers at a monotheistic religion's text. But I think the problem does not lie in the religion itself. It is something that opportunists or extremists in general, not Islamic extremists or Catholic extremists or Hindu extremists do. It is just extremists in general that want to extract, the most bigoted meaning out of any text. So that's what I wanted to say when Sahil made the point about Islamic extremists much earlier in the conversation. And about Mira saying that the satanic verses were banned here. I mean, in India, yeah, we are a democracy, we're secular and all of that, but anything that's offensive, like, to anyone, in fact, like if it's a painting of
Can you hear
the
me?
Hindu goddess Saraswati, for instance, for which MSN was, kicked out of the country, or if it's Taslima Nasreen, for instance. We have several examples. It's not just the satanic verses that were banned. So I don't think it's just, it's like, there's more to it than what Nirav said about the satanic verses being banned to protect India's law and order. Because anything that does not, because India being a conservative, I don't know, not conservative particularly, but like having very strict definitions about morality and immorality. They have in the past banned several things that do not seem to match the ethos of the country, or be in tandem with the culture of the country and the tradition of its people, etc. So it's just not the satanic verses that were banned to protect the law and order or anything like that. Like at other moments, they have cited other reasons to do the same for other pieces of art or literature or Maoist books. Yes. So yeah, I want to just share that.
Thanks, Deb. That's awesome. For those of you who to put a face with the name, Deb is our amazing journalist who puts out so many of our news stories every day and does so much great work for Atheist Republic. So I did want to take a second, since she hasn't been on our chats before, to publicly thank her for all of her hard work and for being on the team. Your point about extremism, I think, is really interesting. It's something I'd like to talk about at some point. Is having these conversations about people's behavior and discussing what they do and focusing on that. Which is an interesting kind of way to frame a conversation. Amr, I think we can hear you now. Armin will unmute you, and we'll see what you have to say. Thanks.
Yeah, okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah. I'm sorry first. I have a problem. Okay. Now I have to say something. Now there's a difference between criticism and making fun of something. Okay. Now, criticism should be allowed, okay? We can't talk about criticism being prohibited. But making fun, I think, should have limits. Okay? Now, if it makes any threat or harm, we can stand to it. But in other cases, I don't think there's any problem. Now, we can hear, I can criticize Christians, okay? But even when I was writing about liberal, when I was still Muslim, now I used to have face threats from Muslims. You can't talk about Islam in any way. Now you can talk about Christianity. Christians will listen to you. Mostly they will listen to you. You can talk about Jews. They will listen to you. Now you can talk about Muslims. You can always be threatened by this. Now it has to do with Islam itself. Sometimes the problem is in the text, now in Quran itself, and sometimes in the face the religion now is at. Now such things happen to Christianity in the Middle Ages. Now that has to do with the face of the religion. Now sometimes has to do with the text itself. Now Muhammad himself ordered to kill his opponents when they talked about him in their poetry. That happened. That's why Muslims deal with the others this way. This is in Islam in the Quran itself. Now we have two problems. One problem has to do with the face of the religion, with the time now, like what happened in the Middle Ages. And now the second one has to do with the texture themselves. Now I can now criticize anybody except Muslims. That's my point.
Thank you, Emma. I had a question about what the first thing you said. The difference between criticizing the religion and making fun of people. Were you saying that, I didn't quite hear the first part, were you saying that from the perspective of Islam, there's a difference between criticism of Islam and making fun of, say, the Prophet? Or were you saying that you personally think there's a difference between criticism and making fun?
No, I was talking about my personal thoughts. Now, in Islam, you can either make fun or criticize. But my point of view, now we could criticize the way we want, but making fun is not always allowed. Depends on the case.
I see. Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
I don't know. I think comedy is one of the best ways of criticizing.
I think.
Yeah, I think that. Okay.
Sorry, go ahead, Emma.
No, it's okay.
Obviously, that's the satire. The whole point of it is ideally to intelligently use humor. Sorry about the background noise for a sec. To intelligently use humor to point out absurdities or extreme perspectives within any particular opinion or conversation. That would be the ideal situation with satire. But again, if we start drawing those finer and finer lines, like what type of humor is okay, it is difficult. And Armin brought that up in the beginning. When you start picking apart what type of free speech is acceptable or whatever, you know, perhaps a better way to try to strike a balance and protect people is to encourage everybody to speak more intelligently and more clearly and louder across the board, so that you have people groups of people who might say one thing, and then to encourage the people who disagree with them to speak up just as loud if they disagree. Perhaps that's the way we strike a balance.
And I just want to just emphasize this again, the freedom of speech is not the same as the right to be heard. People should be allowed to not see what your comedy or your speech. So if people get offended or hurt by your content, it should be very easy for them to not get exposed by it. It's not if you try to go out of your way to make sure that people that don't want to be exposed to your content do get exposed to your content, that should not be allowed. But as long as you're not doing that, people can just, if they don't like a book, they cannot read it. If they don't like a page, Facebook page, they can block it. If they don't like a website, they could not go to it. I don't understand why people that are the people that get offended, it's their responsibility to not get exposed to what they don't want to get exposed to, not the responsibility of the people that are producing that kind of content.
Yeah, okay, I have something to say now. I'll go back on this point. Now you cannot convince me. Now everybody has to say whatever they want to say. If I have to restate it again. Now the problem isn't harming people, not in making fun, if I want to be more precise. Now the problem isn't harming people. I can't say something that threatens somebody. This is what I cannot say. Because humor sometimes, not sometimes, mostly make points, okay? But no, I cannot threaten people. Now if you talk about Islamic textures and Muslims themselves, they feel free to dismiss any religion, to make fun of any religion, even in Quran itself. You can say that easily. It's a mainstream speech, and we can hear it daily. I can hear it in college. I can hear it on television. This is a mainstream speech, but they don't want to accept such things. Say it about Islam. That's the point. That is the point. Now, such things could threaten other people. Muslims say that. Now we have minorities like Christians in Jordan. They feel threatened by this. Now in Jordan usually when there's any feast or a wedding in a church, there must be a police car on the door. They threaten other people easily. They can say it like they're talking like a normal discussion. That is threatening. Now if those cartoons were saying kill Muslims, I would stand and say no, you can't say that. But they were just saying, they were just like visualizing what happens in Syria. What happens in Syria? People are being killed for nothing, just because they are not Muslims, or sometimes they're Muslims, but they have sometimes other visions in the same religion. Like we have Sunnah, we have Shia. Like when we say Catholic and Protestant, Catholic and like now does this. There's Sunni, there's Shia, and they kill each other daily, on daily basis. In Iraq and nowadays ISIS, they do this daily. And actually, such things or such ideas, people are applauding for them. Like normal, moderate Muslims. That's my point now. There are extreme Muslims and moderate Muslims. Extreme Muslims are the ones who killed. Moderate Muslims are the ones who applaud for this. They applaud for this. They always say it's okay. Now, a moderate Muslims like my father, like my brother, they won't kill someone who left their religion. But if they heard about someone who did that, they would say it's his problem. He left the religion, he should be killed. Now, my father, like we had a discussion about what happened in Charlie Hebdo. We had a discussion about that. Now, he wouldn't kill such cartoonists, but he said, yeah, it's okay, they must be killed. My father he's the one who taught me to love people. He's not an extreme person, but he thinks that if you talk about the Prophet, it's okay to be killed. He won't kill him himself. He won't kill the cartoonist himself. But he said, yeah, he should be killed. He made fun of our Prophet. That's my point. Now, even modern Muslims, they won't hear any criticism. Now, even when I say that Muhammad had many wives, I was talking to my mother. He said he had 11 wives. He had, like we call them Jawari in Arabic, which means they're like servants, but he owns. Now he's starting shouting at me, you can't say that. Even though it's in Islam itself, but she doesn't really know about that because she's not an extreme Muslim. She's a moderate Muslim. She doesn't really know that. But she started shouting at me, you can't say that. Okay, I did not say something I made up. It's written in the books. They don't hear any. They don't even want to hear criticism, even in a respectful way. Yeah. I'm done. That's my point.
No, thank you so much. That's a really interesting first-person perspective. I love hearing about those family conversations because I think for a lot of us that's where the rubber meets the road, to use a very overly used phrase, but that is, we have these conversations around the dinner table and it's like, hey, even in my own family, I start bringing up some questions or some difficult questions or criticisms of the holy book that we have sitting on our table over there, and all of a sudden, people get in a frenzy, even when I'm not drawing cartoons or making fun and just asking legitimate questions. And the issue of the extremists do the violence, the moderates are okay with the violence, and then there's some other handfuls of people who very vocally reject it. But that is a really interesting point that you bring up of the people who don't even know their own religion very well, don't even know their own holy book very well, are the ones who are saying, I wouldn't kill him, but I'm kind of glad he got killed. That is such a difficult thing.
Yeah, there's an important point in this for my speak. Now, modern Muslims, let's say 95% of Muslims didn't even read the Quran. There's something that's really serious. Even if they read it, you don't really understand it. It's an old, ancient Arabic language. It's not used anymore. They don't understand it. They don't spend time trying to understand it. It's okay. They just read it. They have to read it during the prayers, but it's okay if they don't understand it. They don't care really about that. That's why if you talk to my father again, I said these Muslims did that in Iraq, in ISIS. They did that in Canada. They killed some Muslim guy killed a police officer or a cop because he's not Muslim. They did that in Australia. They did that in America and Sweden. He says no, this has nothing to do with Islam. He says that he's serious about that. He doesn't know that these texts are in his book. He really doesn't know that. That's why we should differentiate or make a difference between what the texture says, what the extremes do, and what the modern Muslims think. When a modern Muslim posts a video online and says, no, this has nothing to do with Islam, I love people, he's serious about that. He's right about that. But he doesn't know that if he follows these extremes or the religion itself, it's okay to kill others just because they're not Muslims. But he doesn't know that. And the problem, or the serious other problem, is the ones who know that, they always lying. Like Islam never respected women, never ever respected women, but it say it's okay. They like, when you ask Muslim that you can't, when you tell a Muslim you can't marry 4 girls, this is disrespectful. He says it's okay. No, it's not. He starts telling you why this is not. When deep inside he knows this is wrong. It's disrespectful. It's not right. But he starts like making excuses and telling you it's okay. Well, he knows he's wrong. But the majority doesn't know this is wrong, or doesn't think about it. And don't even read these textures. That's the point. They're ignorant. So when you say this, it doesn't represent Islam, they're right about that. This is what they think.
Yeah. I think sometimes encouraging people to read their own holy books is actually a good start toward having a conversation about atheism. At least in my experience within Christianity, it is, because Christians are very similar. A lot of very committed Christians who have very strong moral ideologies about things haven't actually read. And having those conversations is a starting point. I do want to make a point. We are over the hour, but we're going to go ahead and go just a few more minutes. We got started late, and we also want to make sure we had some gaps and delays. So we want to make sure everybody has a chance to have some input. Sorry, Mike. What are things like where you are right now, or what do you have thoughts that you have about this particular issue?
Well, I live in Northeast United States, so it's all pretty liberal and progressive. So everybody pretty much condemns the Charlie Hebdo attacks. I haven't actually met any Muslims that I know personally that support their actions. But back to the freedoms and rights topic and how it applies to this attack. I cannot think of any rights or freedoms that are actually absolute, and that is for the better, because one person's absolute freedoms or rights inherently restrict another person's freedoms or rights. For example, my freedom to walk wherever I want has to end at your doorstep so that you have freedom to have a private space. And the same way this works is I have the freedom to say whatever I want. However, it is less important for me to say whatever I want than it is for you to feel safe, and that's why it is illegal, or should be illegal, for me to verbally threaten you. The same way I can't use my freedom of expression to get away with pointing a gun at you. And however, you do not have a freedom from being offended. No one has the right to not be offended, and no one should have that right. So when they say that, oh, my prophet was offended, or you've offended Islam, or you've offended Muslims, that really shouldn't mean anything, and that shouldn't carry any weight. And for a lot of people it doesn't, but we need to kind of move forward and push that into their culture, so that they can't just hide behind this wall of I was offended, Islam was offended, Muslims were offended. You offended the Prophet. To do whatever they want and go around killing people, beheading people, threatening harm to people, bombing buses in London and subways. And there's really no way to get around that. If they continue to think that they have the right to not be offended, they will continue to use that right to justify any of their actions.
I think that's a lot of where this conversation for a lot of atheists comes back to Islam. Even though, people keep mentioning it's not about Islam, it's about the actions of these particular people. The thing is that as many have mentioned here, it does go back to that. Like, it does actually keep going back to what is acceptable or offensive or whatever. Even people who have been out of the religion for so long still feel that, like Armin mentioned, still feel that rooted sense of injustice when the Prophet is insulted. So ultimately there really is no way around that, no matter how progressive or, I mean, I guess that's kind of what I keep hearing from people is it's like I can't not talk about Islam in this context because it's still going back to that. It's still coming around to that, and so in a way that has to be a part of the conversation, even if it's difficult or frustrating for people.
Yeah, I think some about that. It's not people try to move it, Muslims try to make a difference between Islam and what's happening. You can't say that anymore. Now the Islamic terrorism is happening on a frequent basis. It happens like every maximum a week. We can hear of such a thing, such an event, such an accident. You can't say it has nothing to do with Islam. Now, if I assume that you know nothing about Islam, you at least question what it has to do with Islam. The event. Now, if I assume that you know nothing about Islam, we can't say this has nothing to do with Islam. We can't say that. That's my point. We can't say it has nothing to do with Islam. We can say that without even going to the texts or even talk to a Muslim. If you've never seen a Muslim in your life, or never read the Quran or Sunnah or anything that has to do with Islam, you would say there's something wrong in that has to do with Islam. You can't say it has nothing to do with Islam. Now, these people Muslims are trying to say it has nothing to do with Islam. Sometimes they're right and sometimes they're lying. But it 100% has to do with Islam. You know what Armin mentioned about, now yes, there's a mainstream case in our country. Now you can't say that about Prophet. If you mention that in front of a Muslim who never thought of this before, he would like start shouting at you. You can't say that about our Prophet. Now this is the way they were raised. Okay, they were raised up to hate any other person, to hate any non-Muslim person. That you can't talk about Islam. You can't question about Islam. You can't say where is God. You will be hit by your father when you were 4 or 3 years old. This is the way they were raised. That's why some of us they still think this is wrong. Now I know this is not wrong. You can say that about a prophet. It's okay. We can argue. And I write about that always in Arabic or in English. I write about prophet. I write about Islam, and I criticize them. It's okay to me. But I still think that there's something with that. Now I was brought to think that you can't say about these holy things, holy like personalities. You can't say about it. You can't criticize them. This is how we were brought up, raised. This is the case here. It's a mainstream case that you can't criticize such people.
Yeah, those are very deep-rooted things, especially when people grow up they're surrounded by it, and it starts when they're kids. So it's a tough thing to shake for people, and that's why I think these issues and these conversations become really difficult because it's emotional, it's personal. It is personal for people, even though it is just about the religion, not directly toward them. In their minds, to them, it feels very personal, and that makes it. I think that makes it hard. We're coming up on 10 minutes past the hour, so I want to wrap it up officially so that people who need to go can go and not feel like they're being rude. And I also need to get going. So I'm going to wrap it up, but I don't necessarily want my word to be the last word. So if anybody has any final brief thoughts, real quick, let's keep it just at a handful of seconds, please.
Okay, I just want to.
Deb is waving frantically at me, trying to get my attention. So go ahead, Deb. Deb needs to be unmuted, I think. One sec, Deb. Sorry, you're muted. 1 second. Armin's frantically looking.
It doesn't let me unmute her because I have to scroll all the way down, and it doesn't let me scroll down. Wait, Deb, can you unmute yourself? Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, Deb will get you squared away, and I want to make sure you have a chance to say something. Anybody else have something they wanted to say real quick?
I just want to point out how important what you said was, and I think the key is to try to communicate to some moderate Muslims that this is not personal, that attacking, criticizing Islam is as much of an attack on Muslims as teaching math is an attack on people that are not good on math. Like criticizing an ideology or a way of thinking or any viewpoint has nothing to do with attacking the people that hold that viewpoint. And if you could communicate that with moderates somehow to make it less personal, to show them that when we are criticizing their religion, we are not attacking them as a whole group of people or attacking them as individuals. If you could convince them of that, that would be amazing. And the best way to do that, I think, is to, while criticizing Islam, at the same time join moderate Muslims in criticizing bigots and people that are attacking them as individuals and as a community as a whole. If you could do both of those things at the same time, maybe some of them at least could start, like more of them, because some of them do, more of them could start mentioning that they respect and welcome us criticizing the religion as long as we do it in environments where they could opt out of it when they want to.
Very good points. All right. I don't think we're having any more success on meeting you, Deb. Sorry, I don't know what that's all about. But we're gonna go off our live feed, and we'll see all of you who are watching hopefully next week. We're gonna continue our conversation about Hinduism because there was quite a lot of interest in that. And so that's what we're going to go with for now. That could change between now and then. We'll let you know. So we hope to see you next week. And thanks for joining us today. All of you here are welcome to stay on, but we're just going to go off our live feed. Thanks, everybody.